Anti-Semitism doesn't go away if we don't perform Wagner, but it can be a conversation if we do.
Hello, bonjour, shalom, and welcome to Culturally Jewish. I'm David Sklar.
And I'm Ilana Zakon.
On this week's episode, we chat with opera singer Jaclyn Grossman on how she feels as a Jew singing Wagner.
Mama always wanted me to be a doctor, but I became an artist and that really shocked her. Now I'm interviewing people in the biz, pros, and newish, but all of them are artists and they're culturally Jewish.
Alana, how are you doing?
I am doing good. It's been a bit of a stressful morning. This is going to sound like the most fetchy thing that I'll ever say.
Well, we heard you were running late. Yes,
I was stuck in line at a kosher market because I'm hosting a Moishe House Without Walls Shabbat picnic tomorrow.
Oh, lovely.
And I had no time in the last few days to go to the store. And so I just went to a kosher grocery store, and a very nice Hasidic man let me go in front of him. I'm not often acknowledged by the Hasidic men in my area, but today that was a mitzvah moment. But he had, a whole cart full of the typical Jewish snacks, and I'm just waiting with two challahs trying to get out of there because I did all the rest of my shopping at the other kosher market down the street. So anyway, very Jewish morning, but I'm feeling a little...
that this kosher market does not have robot self-checkout yet? It's all done in person?
Actually, Mahadran, which is where I went first, does have the robot self-checkout, which is very, very high-tech for a religious Jewish kosher store. This other one only had one cashier, so that was where I got stuck.
I'm curious if the robot can work during Shabbat or not, or he has to be turned offline.
I mean, the stores aren't open on Shabbat, so I don't think we're going to run into that problem.
That's a very fair point, Alana.
Anyway, let's talk about opera. Enough about kosher marketplaces. David, what's your relationship with opera?
Well, if you had asked me that 3 years ago, I would have said little to nothing. But it turns out there's a project I work with at the Calgary Opera. They have a program called Let's Make an Opera. And what I do is I go into a different school every year and sort of create an opera from scratch based on what the students and faculty, the teachers have come together on a theme or a topic that is important to the entire student body. And then I work together with the students to create the characters, to create the storyline, to create all the lyrics for what is called the libretto. I become basically the librettist. Every year I work together to write this whole thing. And then the next process happens where they invite a director to come in and create this whole thing. It's like an 8-month project. And actually in about 10 days, I'm going to see the final product now at Belfast School in Calgary.
Wow. So what kind of learning curve did you have trying to understand how to write something like this?
Yeah, because I had no background as a librettist writing anything opera-esque. So I took my background in writing and playwriting, wanting to create a really great story with great characters that sort of start one way, change the other. I've worked a lot with students in the past to create theater shows. That's a lot of my background, but definitely not opera. So I had to lean on the expertise of the opera, the Calgary Opera, to be like, how do you do this? So they gave me a lot of instructions. I reached out to some fellow colleagues who have done it in the past, and they sort of said, this is how you got to gear it. This is the lyrics. This is how you have to set up the opera, and these are your pitfalls to avoid. So there's a lot of repetition, but basically I don't create the music, I don't create the sounds, but I create the lyrics for the opera.
That's so cool. So what do you most appreciate about opera now that you've delved into it more?
Yeah, I appreciate what it can do as a story, sort of. I appreciate that it can do something very different, the way that a work of writing, let's say a standard play cannot accomplish. The music can really bring and reinforce the storyline together, and it gets the kids super excited. They want to perform. A lot of these kids are looking forward to performing the sounds and the words. So that's what I've appreciated now.
Cool.
Anything for you on the opera end? You've been giving me the whole degree here.
I mean, the only thing that I could say, which is very, very minor, is when I first started taking singing lessons, about 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. Even though we were mostly working on musical theater repertory, she had said, it might be worth it to explore some opera. So we worked on a couple of songs, and I remember I spent most of my time looking up how to pronounce words in German. But it is interesting. It definitely made me appreciate it more. I think as a kid, I would hear opera and be like, oh, what is this? Like, it felt cartoony to me. And then when I learned about it from a singing perspective, I was like, wow. And so if I happened to listen to a classical music station on the radio or something, I had a deeper appreciation for the amount of vocal technique that it takes in order to sing opera. So we're very excited today to have Jaclyn Grossman, a soprano opera singer who is based in Toronto, whose repertoire has everything from Yiddish opera, which we'd never heard of before, and the classic opera such as Wagner, which we're going to delve into with her because he was a pretty well-known anti-Semite. Jaclyn's also the co-founder of the Likht Ensemble, which creates work from Shoah survivors, that they like songs that they have composed either during the Holocaust or afterwards. She also develops new work, which we're going to get into with her. We're going to hear a bit of her own music. We're going to talk all about her opera journey. So let's take a listen.
Jaclyn, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
So you'll be performing 2 back-to-back Wagner operas for the Edmonton Opera at the end of May and beginning of June, but then shifting to a Yiddish narrator for the Festival of Song series. I want to know how you sort of handle this mental whiplash going from one to the other, particularly since, and I'm sure we'll get into a bit later on, that Wagner was not the best of friends when it came to the Jewish community.
Yes, I think that is a very kind understatement about it, definitely. And I'll say that my experience with singing Wagner and Jewish music has been wrought with a lot of questions on my own part. How do I make sense of these very different worlds? I recently described myself to someone as a Jewish Wagner-obsessed Holocaust music researcher. And I thought, wow, that's something that I didn't plan for, but I guess what is life if not a funny coincidence? So
I bet you're the only one too.
You'd be surprised to find how many people do have interest in this, but yes, I do find that I am not the most common breed for sure. Starting with, where my Wagner love began, it really started right as I started my training in classical music. The first day of my undergraduate degree, I was told by a very kind professor that I was a dramatic soprano. And as someone who didn't know that much about classical music, I said, is it because of my personality? And everyone laughed, and I didn't understand why. And so he said, okay, you're Wagnerian, you'll sing Brunhilde, you'll sing Isolde. And I said, I don't know what those words mean, but thank you very much. And so I went home and I decided to listen to Wagner's Ring Cycle at 18, my first week of school. And I thought, wow, this is the best music ever. This is absolutely what I want to do. 100% I have to sing this. I totally turned a blind eye to who Wagner was. I didn't really have any knowledge to start with. I just was obsessed with this glorious music. And then fast forward to 2020, when I started doing research and performing Jewish Holocaust music, I sort of had a bit of a personal crisis when I realized the controversy in the two worlds that I exist in. And so, yeah, it's a great question because I've spent a good 4 years trying to make sense of my opinion on how to manage these two different worlds.
And where are you at now?
I love both of these musical worlds so much. Wagner is still one of my absolute favorite composers, and I think that canceling him is a missed opportunity to, hear exceptional music, but also to open a dialogue about Jewish representation that might be uncomfortable. And so I really see it as, what are the arts for if not to open these doors, to open these dialogues in an engaging and brave way? And why wouldn't I want to engage with both of these things?
And how have audiences reacted to that blend? I mean, specifically Jewish audiences, because I know you do a lot of, as you said, work on the Holocaust. Have people come to you and say, how dare you put Wagner with Holocaust stories? And how do you respond to questions like that?
Yes. I have to say that I haven't received a lot of backlash from the Jewish community. And I've been expecting it this whole time. I have to admit that I've wondered when that would happen. But in my own journey of figuring out how to make sense of this, I spent a lot of time talking to Jewish mentors. Specifically, for example, Cantor Osborne at Temple Sinai in Toronto. Both of us love Wagner. And so I said, how do you deal with this? Is it okay? Are we wrong? Are we bad Jews? Should we stop? Those are all questions I've certainly asked myself many times. And I think that I have a whole series of thoughts about why Jewish people are drawn to Wagner. But what I think people feel excited about from my experience is the opportunity to talk about this Jewish representation, to talk about this anti-Semitism that is inherent in a lot of music that we see, a lot of theater that we see. It's not just opera, but we're talking about The Merchant of Venice or Oliver Twist. It's part of these different art pieces. And rather than shying away from things, I think that we should engage further.
What is your official stance that there's an unofficial boycott of Wagner in Israel to this day? People are afraid that they're going to upset a lot of the Holocaust generation. It's not illegal, but sort of anytime it's put on, it's sort of said, do you really want to go down this road? What's your view on that?
I have to admit that my view on that is ever changing, because I think that I can't understand the experience of a Holocaust survivor, and their relationship with the music is different than mine. And of course it should be. And I recognize that there is a lot of trauma that comes with hearing this music that might have been heard in the concentration camps or was heard and represents certain things to these communities. So I completely respect people choosing not to engage with this music. I think that's very valid. I think as someone who grew up in Canada and performs in North America mainly, it just continues, sorry to be a broken record, but it remains as an opportunity. I don't think Wagner is going anywhere, and I don't want him to. The music, the person can go. But I do think that in engaging with Wagner, we can open a door to a conversation that isn't happening as often as I'd like to see it happening. And what other way to start it than through an artistic pursuit?
The way you've been talking about Wagner right now sort of made me immediately think of something like the modern day Kanye, right? Where people in the Jewish community are grappling and wrestling with someone who's come out, has made incredibly anti-Semitic comments today, and Jewish communities and people are saying, we're boycotting his music. We're not going to allow it. Do you see this kind of similarity between Wagner of the 19th century and Kanye of today?
It's a complicated question. I'll do my best to have some clear thoughts on it. I think that, of course, there are similarities. Kanye has come out and said specific things about the Jewish community, and Wagner was very well known to have come out and say very specific things about the Jewish community as well. And if we want to just take a case study, we can look at his essay, Jewishness in Music, which he published in 1850 under a pseudonym, and then 1869 under his own name, wanting to attach himself to these beliefs and values. So there was no denying that Wagner had these specific views on Jewish people. And in these essays, not just the one, but there are multiple, he spoke about how, perpetuating various Jewish tropes. Jews are greedy, wealthy, have global dominance, control the media, are incapable of love, are not beautiful, are not able to speak the language of another place and assimilate. And these are tropes that we are still dealing with today, being perpetuated by people like Kanye. So I think that I think that separating the art from the artist, which a lot of people talk about, is not the way forward, which might be a controversial thought. But I don't think that we can separate the art and the artist, especially with Wagner, when in his operas, he, speaks about all of these different tropes about Jewish people, and then he writes characters that portray those same tropes. And so there's no denying to me and to, I guess, a lot of different scholars that while Wagner wasn't specifically saying this is a Jewish character, he was writing pieces that had anti-Semitism woven into the ideological fabric of the operas themselves. These aren't caricatures of Jews, but they do incorporate unmistakable anti-Semitic characters or characteristics. And that's why I just keep coming back to my broken record point about how we can't pretend that Wagner wasn't who he was, and we can't pretend that these things aren't inherent in his operas. Should we engage with art by immoral artists is a big question in society right now, especially in opera, when we've inherited a canon of music that has been created throughout a long period of history. And of course, values in society have changed, thank goodness, but we are dealing with what to do with these specific pieces. And I think that turning away from them is a missed opportunity. Anti-Semitism doesn't go away if we don't perform Wagner, but it can be a conversation if we do.
I love that take. I want to talk about specific projects of yours and how you're blending a lot of these ideas that you just talked about. So I know you're developing a piece called Jewish Space Lasers, which sounds like it's a blend of a lot of styles, Borscht Belt comedy, Holocaust stories, Wagner. Can you walk us through this piece and your process?
Sure. I mean, I think that you're just identifying exactly what it is. We are Jewish artists who have our hands in a lot of pots and we're confused. How does it feel to go back and forth from singing Wagner and Holocaust music, which is frankly a normal day for me at this point? When I practice, it's usually both of those things,
Wow.
which is wild, let me tell you. It also, the questions about what does it feel like to be Jewish right now? What does it feel like to be Jewish in opera spaces, performing music with specific Jewish representation, performing Holocaust music, learning about these incredible people who were lost to the Holocaust and who were so dedicated to their art and giving back to German society in an artistic way from the society that was shunning them, both as artists and people. There's just so many layers to it for us. And so it's a very personal piece. And in the most Jewish way possible, we're going back and forth between extreme satire and Borscht Belt style comedy. So poking fun at this idea of a, fictional Jewish cabal that is losing its grip on global dominance as our space lasers that, of course, we all have, are failing.
Of course.
And then also the other side of the show is my collaborator, Nate, and I, along with our wonderful friend Tal, who's writing the show with us. But it's Nate and I grappling with writing the show and all of the things that are happening in the world around us as we try to hold on to this idea of comedy as a way to understand, just like Jewish people of every period of the world have done, but all of the questions that come with that. And are we doing something hurtful or helpful? How can we, make sense of this weird place that we occupy?
Because this is still happening to you right now. Like, I remember hearing that, a week after October 7th, the Pacific Opera Victoria decided to postpone one of your shows. And this is sort of like, Victoria is having a growing reputation now for canceling a lot of Jewish themed shows. So I want to know, was that your decision? Was that the company's decision? What was the reason behind postponing and canceling your show?
Yeah, it's a good question. And we had some conversation. There were safety concerns and concerns for the community. And we're still in an ongoing conversation about postponement. I will offer, though, that there is a small group of opera humans gathering, both Jewish and Arab artists, who are having a conversation about how can we platform all of us? How can platforming all of us and talking about peace and coexistence and dignity and safety and support for all communities, how can that be helpful? And in my opinion, that's what we need more than anything right now, is platforming artists who are impacted by this current time so that we can find ways to actually move forward together.
That's amazing. I feel like you're the first person we've had on the show to talk about like a peace platform, a peace-oriented platform. Has that been the climate in the opera world? Is there a lot more, I guess, promotion of peace and maybe a little bit less of the cancellation thing? Or is this something you're working against and you have this, team of people that are coming saying everyone else is dealing with it in this cancellation way, let's step forward?
I think that what I'm learning is that a lot of people are afraid of doing something wrong. And whatever wrong means, that's a big umbrella. And so a lot of people might feel frozen. And so I'm very inspired by groups like Standing Together that are really about peace activism and what does it mean to work together for Jewish and Palestinian and Arab and Israeli people to find a way to live in peace with dignity and safety, which is what I strongly stand for. And with that in mind, we've just a very small group of us have started to gather and have this conversation about what something like that can look like. And I think that it's hard and slow work because we want to make sure that we're doing it well and right and in a way that is respectful to everyone. And the wonderful thing that it's giving me is hope that there is a way forward for us, that we can do this if we take the time to learn and have conversations and understand each other and then act. And I think that I just feel very lucky that I have found myself in this pocket of people who have these shared goals and values.
I want to hear a bit about the Likht Ensemble. So the ensemble uses compositions from Holocaust survivors. Are these compositions that survivors wrote in the camps or afterwards? And can you tell us about your work with them, if at all, to tell these stories?
Yeah, it's actually a bit of both what you're describing. We started in 2020 just as COVID was about to take hold and found ourselves with a whole lot of free time suddenly. And so we decided to just pour ourselves into this recent discovery that we had, which was that music was actually written within the ghettos and concentration camps of the Holocaust. And it survived through, I mean, every story is absolutely incredible and important. For example, Edwin Geist is a composer whose music we received from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum from a musicologist named Brett Werb. And he sent us these manuscript sheets of paper by Edwin Geist that survived because when he was taken to the Kovno ghetto, his friend snuck into the apartment and scooped up all of the music. And that's what we play off of today. Or another story is Shimon Laks, who was the conductor of the Auschwitz Orchestra, found a crumpled up piece of paper on the ground that smelled terrible, apparently. And he opened it to find these melodies for Polish polonaises and created these full arrangements that exist today. And there's just so many stories like that where, the music survived despite the odds. It's everything from fully complete classical music pieces, German lieder, to folk songs with only a vocal line. And my collaborator, Nate Ben-Horeen, is a wonderfully brilliant composer. Thank goodness, because he's able to finish pieces that really might not have been able to have a life without, some love from him.
And your company also has a recital series called The Showa Songbook, which has toured across Canada and the US. What has been the reception to these performances?
It has been overwhelmingly wonderful. I never understood how personal and how meaningful being an artist could be until I really started doing this work. Ranging from people expressing that they didn't know about the Jewish experience or much about the Holocaust, and this has opened their eyes to something that they want to learn more about. They feel like they're allowed to engage in a topic that felt uncomfortable. To Jewish survivors or people who had family who died in the Holocaust, saying this brought them back. There's a survivor who once commented and said, it made me remember my family who perished in Auschwitz. And I can't tell you how emotional and how meaningful that was for us to know that we maybe are bringing some peace and some memory back to our community that is, still struggling with and will always struggle with this trauma. But how can we deal with it? Maybe coming together and remembering through music is a way. I just also wanted to add that the music is exceptionally good and comes in all forms of musical style and should be performed not just by Jewish artists, but by everyone who wants to engage with, classical art song or folk music or cabaret songs. It's just as wonderful as the other composers of the time who were so successful and should be celebrated in the same way.
Jaclyn, I probably have the toughest and most controversial question of our interview coming up right now. I have to ask, I really do. This is coming from a Calgarian. How do you handle being in Edmonton for longer than 24 hours?
Oh my gosh. I do. I'm growing a love for Edmonton. I'm not much of a sports human, but I will say that it's been a lot of fun being in the core of downtown as the Oilers are playing. I'm so sorry to everyone from Toronto. Please forgive me for saying it. But I'm having a really good time seeing, the drama unfold. Edmonton Opera did this really fun event at the, like, right in the heart of the Ice District, where two of our amazing colleagues sang different pieces. They sang a rendition that Edmonton Opera created and supported the Oilers of La Bamba, and it's a lot of fun to be here. The city is really alive right now. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of opera in Edmonton, actually. A lot of artists are here right now. I'm really just having the best time. As soon as you get a humidifier to get over the dryness, you are good to go.
I think, you know what? I think we could work together and listen to each other and come closer through our differences.
What a nice full
look
circle.
At that. We're learning.
Jaclyn, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. It was a pleasure.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me again.
I can't date women right now because I'm too busy calling myself a piece of shit.
I had a dysfunctional Jewish mother and I had a dysfunctional Native mother.
I had 25 full years of utter struggle and failure.
I started to realize the absurdity of my inability to let go of this monster of guilt.
Sounds like fun, doesn't it? Hi, I'm Ralph Benrig. I'm the host of Not That Kind of Rabbi, where we look at people's spiritual journeys and take a little time for their self-reflection, and maybe yours. You can get it all at thecjn.ca/NTKR or wherever you get your podcasts.
So, first off, if you want to actually see Jaclyn perform live and you live in the Edmonton area or want to travel to the Edmonton area, Jaclyn Grossman is going to be performing with the Edmonton Opera starting now and going into the first couple weeks of June. She's performing Das Rheingold and Die Walker. How did I do, David? How's my pronunciation?
You've got to put, I think, more chs into it. So, like, das Rheingold and Die Walker.
All right. David, what's happening on your end?
On my end, it's not on my end. It's happening in Toronto. But basically on June 2nd at 1 p.m. at the Prosserman JCC, there's going to be a masterclass on the new Israeli cinema with film historian and critic Dr. Ariel Schweitzer. And Dr. Schweitzer will discuss trends and themes that have emerged over the past 20 years in Israeli cinema. New women's cinema, LGBTQ plus films, representation of marginalized communities in Israel, new depictions of religion, and a bold film trilogy of films that center around the First Lebanon War.
Amazing. Also in Toronto, we can't forget the Toronto Jewish Film Festival starts May 30th and goes through June 9th. It's the 32nd edition. There are 64 feature films, 18 short films from 15 countries. So be sure to check that out.
Yeah, definitely lots happening in Toronto because my next one is also taking place at the Prosserman JCC. We're going to have Naam Shefi, who takes the stage with her friend Eden Greenspan to present her new cookbook, The Jewish Holiday Table. And this is a quote from them. Sort of says, each holiday offers an opportunity to find personal meaning in an ancient tradition that is always evolving. And at their core is time to spend around a table with the people we love most. So this book was collected by the Jewish Food Society, an organization dedicated to preserving Jewish cuisine around the world. There's 135 recipes and accompanying stories with the Jewish holiday table, which is a dazzling expression of all the ways that we celebrate through what we bring to the table.
Well, I hope that you're getting good weather out there because here in Montreal, it is hot.
I've heard.
Yeah, it's sweltering and I'm in a new apartment which doesn't have air conditioning. So, the Montreal life. But we have like a stand-up one, though it keeps turning off the outlet's not very happy. So it's like, I'm taking up all the energy. I need to turn off all the lights. So we have to keep resetting it.
As you say that, literally right now, down down in my garden, a gentleman is installing an air conditioning unit for the whole house. So
wow.
I sympathize, but I won't be having your problems this summer.
It's
anymore.
okay. It's okay. My last place had air conditioning. I just wanted to move to this area. So it's really my fault. No complaints. Anyway, enjoy, everyone. I hope wherever you are in Canada, you're getting some nice summer weather coming your way. Now I sound like I'm a weather person. Have a nice Jewish summer weather.
Take care, everyone, and be well.
Culturally Jewish is hosted by me, David Sklar, and
Ilana Zakon.
We're produced and edited by Michael Freeman, and our theme music is by Sarah Siegel-Lazar. We're a member of the CJN Podcast Network. To support our work and everything the CJN does, visit thecjn.ca/donate to make a monthly donation and receive a charitable tax receipt.
Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.
Ido tego Sacharin kilka żarnek, Ido tego Sacharin kilka żarnek.
Y'all remember that joke from Airplane? The old lady asked for some light reading.
How about this leaflet, famous Jewish sports legends?
But in actuality, that's changing. Jews are crushing it in sports around the world, and we are here to celebrate them.
Sandy Koufax gets his 10th strikeout.
Zach Hyman, his first career hat trick. 41 points for Diddy Avdia. It's Sue Bird's building.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Jamie.
We love Jews and we love sports, but most of all, we love kvelling over Jews in sports.
Together we host Menschwarmers, the longest running Jewish sports podcast in the world. Listen and subscribe at thecjn.ca and wherever you find your podcasts.